"These aren't for you," Trent Holloway said, and he plucked the key fob right out of Calvin Dupree's hand and set it down on the glass counter like it was something he didn't want to catch from. Then, because the man in the dusty work jacket didn't move fast enough, Holloway swept the little stack of bills off the counter with the back of his hand. Hundreds, fives, a folded cashier's check, all of it fluttering down onto the polished showroom floor between a midnight blue coupe and a rope stanchion. "Pick it up," he said. "Pick it up and take it on out of here before you scratch something you can't pay for." There were 9 people standing close enough to hear. 4 of them had their phones halfway up before the last bill hit the marble. And Trent Holloway, 38 years old, top closer at Meridian Motor Cars 3 years running, had absolutely no idea that the man he was talking down to had bought this dealership and the 11 others like it 6 days earlier. He'd find out. But not yet. 2 hours before that money hit the floor, Calvin Dupree was sitting in a glass office on the top floor of a building in downtown Dallas, and the desk in front of him was a mess. Not a metaphor, an actual mess. Closing binders, asset schedules, a stack of dealership inspection reports 2 inches thick, 3 coffee cups he kept meaning to clear and never did. 12 rooftops, the brokers called them. 12 dealerships across North Texas, all of them now flying under the flag of a company Calvin had started in a rented 2-bay garage 31 years back, when he was changing transmissions himself and sleeping on a cot in the office because he couldn't afford both rent and a shop. The acquisition had closed on Monday, $41 million, the largest deal he'd ever signed his name to. His assistant tapped on the door and leaned in. "The press team wants to know if you'll do the photo at the flagship store Friday," she said. "Meridian Motor Cars, the one in Preston Hollow. They're thinking a ribbon, a banner, the whole." "Cancel my afternoon," Calvin said. She paused. She'd been with him 11 years and she knew the look. "Sir, I'm going to go look at one of them today. By myself." He stood and pulled a jacket off the back of his chair, and it wasn't one of his good ones. It was a canvas work jacket, soft and pale at the elbows, the kind of thing a man wears to clean out a garage. He'd had it longer than he'd had money. "Meridian," he said, "the Preston Hollow store. I want to see it before anybody there knows my face." She'd done this dance with him before. "Should I let the regional VP know you're?" No, he pulled a ball cap on, no logo, brim low. That's the whole point. Now, here is a thing you should understand about Calvin Dupree, because the man at the dealership never bothered to learn it. He did not walk into a place he was about to own wearing a $5,000 suit with cameras trailing behind him. He'd tried it the polished way exactly once, 20 years earlier, and what he'd seen was a building full of people performing for the boss. Big smiles, tucked shirts, nobody being who they actually were. So he stopped. After that, when Calvin wanted the truth about a place, he'd go in looking like a man who had nothing, because the way people treated a man they thought had nothing told him more than any quarterly report ever could. A spreadsheet can't show you a person's heart. But 10 minutes at a counter can. He drove the truck. Not the car his company leased for him. The truck. A 12-year-old pickup with 190,000 miles on it and a crack across the bottom of the windshield he kept meaning to fix and never did, because he liked the way it reminded him of the garage, of the cot, of the man he used to be when nobody would lend him a dime. The bed had a coil of jumper cables and a 5-gallon bucket and a streak of dried red clay from a fishing road out past Kaufman. He parked it in the visitor row at Meridian Motor Cars at 3:40 in the afternoon, between a white convertible and a sedan that cost more than most people's houses. And maybe you already know exactly how the next part is going to go. Maybe you've felt it yourself, that particular cold that comes off a room when you walk in and the people in it decide, in about half a second, that you don't belong. If you have, this story is going to sit on you a little. Stay with it anyway. Meridian Motor Cars was beautiful, and it was built to make you feel it. 40-foot glass walls, a floor of imported marble so clean you could have eaten off it. 11 cars on the showroom floor arranged like sculpture, each on its own square of lighter stone, each with a little card on a brass stand listing a price that had more digits than a phone number. The air smelled like new leather and money and the faint citrus of whatever they cleaned the glass with. Somewhere a sound system played something soft and instrumental, the kind of music designed to make you reach for your wallet without noticing you'd done it. Calvin stepped inside and stopped near the flagship coupe, the halo car, the one in the center of the room with the spotlight on it. $190,000, the card said. Midnight blue, the paint so deep it looked wet. He'd read the spec sheet a dozen times. He wanted to put his hands on one. A young woman behind the reception desk looked up and smiled at him, and it was a real smile, not a sales smile. Her name was Maya Brennan, 23, and she'd been working the front desk at Meridian for 7 months, which was long enough to know that a real welcome was not something this building handed out evenly. "Afternoon," she said. "Welcome to Meridian. Can I get somebody to help you?" "I'd like to look at that one," Calvin said, nodding at the blue coupe. "Maybe take it out, if that's allowed." "Of course it is," Maya said, and she meant it. "Let me grab one of our," and that was as far as she got, because a hand came down flat on the counter beside hers. "I'll take this," Trent Holloway said. You'd have liked Holloway the first 10 seconds. Good suit, good teeth, a handshake he practiced. He had the kind of face that did well in the photos they pinned to the wall by the door. Salesman of the move, his own face up there 3 times. But there's a particular way a man looks at another man when he's already decided he's wasting his time, and Holloway turned that look on Calvin Dupree like he was flipping a switch. He looked at the jacket. He looked at the boots, which still had a little of that red Kaufman clay on the toe. He looked at the cap. "Help you find something?" Holloway said, and the way he said it, you understand, was the opposite of help. "I'd like to drive the coupe," Calvin said. "The blue one." Holloway smiled with his mouth. "The blue one's the GT. He let a beat go. "That's 190, friend." He said the number slowly, the way you'd say something to a child or a dog. "Out the door, with tax and title, you're looking at north of 200. He glanced at the windshield, at the parking lot beyond it, where the cab of an old pickup was just visible over the convertible. "That your truck out there?" "It is." Holloway nodded like that confirmed something. "Tell you what, we get a lot of folks come in on a slow afternoon just to sit in the nice cars, take a couple pictures, feel like a big shot for 10 minutes. Nothing wrong with that." He spread his hands, generous, magnanimous. "But the GT's not a tire kicker car. So before I pull a $190,000 vehicle off the floor, I'm going to need to see that you're actually in a position to buy it." Maya Brennan, still standing there, said quietly, "Trent, I can just. Did I ask you?" Holloway didn't even turn his head. "Go answer the phones." The phone wasn't ringing. Maya's face went tight, and she took a half step back, and she dropped her eyes to the desk, and you could see the math she was doing, the same math a lot of people in that building had learned to do. She was 23. She had rent. She had a brother in community college she was helping cover. She knew exactly what happened to people who crossed Trent Holloway because she'd watched it happen twice already this year. So she went quiet, but she didn't leave. Hold on to that. She didn't leave. Calvin reached into the inside pocket of the canvas jacket and took out an envelope. From it, he pulled a cashier's check, folded once, and a band of cash he'd stopped at the bank for on the way, because he'd wanted to see the whole thing play out, all of it, the way a man looks at the truth. He set the check on the glass counter and smoothed it flat. "Made it out this morning," he said. 190, plus a little for the tax. If the numbers work, I'll write it for whatever you need. Now, you'd think that would end it. A cashier's check is about as good as money gets. A bank stands behind it. But Trent Holloway picked it up by one corner, the way you'd pick up something a stranger had dropped on the sidewalk, and he held it up to the showroom light and turned it, tilting it left and right, and he ran his thumb across the printing. "Where'd you get this?" Holloway said. "The bank," Calvin said. "Same place you'd get one." Holloway didn't laugh. He set the check down but kept 2 fingers on it like Calvin might snatch it. "We've had problems," he said. "People come in with paper that doesn't clear. People come in and they're not really shopping, you understand me, they're looking, casing, seeing what's on the floor, where the keys are kept, who's working." He let that word sit there in the citrus clean air. Casing. Like Calvin Dupree had walked into a dealership he owned to scope it for a robbery. "So you'll forgive me if I want to make a couple calls before I hand you a set of keys." A man at the end of the showroom, a salesman named Wade Sutton, who handled the certified pre-owned out back, drifted closer with his hands in his pockets and a look on his face like he'd swallowed something he wasn't sure about. He didn't say anything. He just watched. There were others now, too. A couple shopping a white SUV by the window had stopped pretending to read the window sticker. A man in golf clothes near the espresso bar, the dealership had an espresso bar, was watching over the rim of his little cup. Calvin kept his voice flat and even. "I came to look at a car," he said. "I've got a certified check and cash on the counter. You can call the bank. The number's on it. I'll wait." I'm sure you will, Holloway said. And here's where you watch a certain kind of man enjoy himself. Because Trent Halvers was enjoying himself now, you could see it. The way he settled his weight and crossed his arms. He had the floor. He had the keys. He had a building full of people who weren't going to say a word. Tell you what, he said. Why don't you go ahead and turn out your pockets for me? Calvin looked at him. Say that again. Your pockets? Holloway nodded toward Wade Sutton, who flinched. Just so we're all comfortable. You come in here, dressed like that, driving that, throwing around a check that I got no way to verify in the next 5 minutes, and you want me to believe you've got 200 grand. He shrugged, and the shrug was the cruelest part of it, because it pretended to be reasonable. Empty 'em out. Show me you didn't pocket anything off the floor. Then maybe we talk. The couple by the window had gone still. The woman put her hand on her husband's arm. The husband looked at his shoes. And here is a thing about rooms like that one, a thing the man telling you this has seen more times than he'd like. The cruelty is never the worst part. The worst part is the silence around it. The 9 people who saw and went quiet and decided it wasn't theirs to fix. Calvin Dupree stood there for a long moment. And then, slowly, because he wanted Holloway to remember every second of it later, he reached into his jacket. He took out a folded sheet of paper and set it on the counter. He took out a set of truck keys and set those down too. He took out a worn leather wallet, soft as cloth, and laid it beside the rest. That's everything, he said. That's what's in my pockets. Holloway picked up the wallet first. He thumbed it open and flipped through it, and there were several hundreds in there, and a black card behind the ID sleeve he didn't bother to pull out, and a business card he didn't read. He wasn't looking for anything. You understand that, right? He wasn't searching for stolen property. He was searching because he could, because there is a kind of small man who, handed a little power, will squeeze it just to feel his own grip. He tossed the wallet back down and it slid and nearly went off the edge, and Maya Brennan caught it without thinking and set it gently back, and she didn't look at Holloway when she did it. Then Holloway picked up the folded sheet of paper and started to open it. Calvin's hand came down on top of it. Not hard, not a grab, just enough. That one's personal, he said. Nothing's personal in my showroom, Holloway said, and he pulled. That one is, Calvin said, and his hand stayed put, and for a second the two of them held the paper between them on the glass, and what was on that paper, folded and quiet under Calvin Dupree's palm, was the executed purchase agreement for Meridian Holdings, 12 rooftops, $41 million. Signed in blue ink at the bottom by the man Trent Holloway was about to ask to crawl on the floor. But Holloway didn't know that, not yet, and the not knowing was about to cost him everything he'd built. Holloway let go. He smiled and stepped back, and you could see him deciding to end this his way. Fine, he said. He reached over the counter and snatched up the cashier's check, and then he scooped the band of cash off the glass, and he held all of it in his fist for a second, looking Calvin dead in the eye, and then he opened his hand and let it all fall. The check, the hundreds, the fives. It scattered across the marble. A bill slid under the rope stanchion. Another came to rest against the front tire of the blue GT. There's your money, Holloway said, loud now, loud enough for the whole room. Pick it up, he pointed at the floor. Get down there and pick it up and get your truck off my lot before I have you towed, boy. The word landed in the room like a dropped glass. You heard it. Everybody heard it. Maya Brennan put her hand over her mouth. The woman by the window made a small sound. Wade Sutton took a full step back, like the floor under that word might give way. And the man in the golf clothes by the espresso bar, the one with the expensive watch, he looked over at Calvin and he shook his head. Slow, but he wasn't shaking it at Holloway. He was shaking it at Calvin. Like a man standing perfectly still while someone humiliated him was, somehow, the one making trouble. Calvin looked down at the money on the floor. He could see himself faintly in the marble, stretched and broken up by the seams. He looked at the bills. He looked at Holloway's shoes, polished black loafers, tapping. He did not kneel. He looked up and said very quietly, "Who's your regional VP?" Holloway laughed. An actual laugh, head tipping back. "Oh, that's good," he said. "You gonna call corporate on me?" He spread his arms wide to the room, playing to it. "Go ahead, friend. Call anybody you want. I've been the top closer in this region 3 years running. You think one word out of you outweighs 3 years of numbers?" "I didn't ask if they'd take my word," Calvin said. "I asked for a name." Holloway shook his head, delighted. "Vivian Castellano, Regional VP. He waved a hand at the cash on the floor. "Knock yourself out." Calvin took out his phone. He unlocked it. He found a number that was already in there near the top because Vivian Castellano had reported to him for 2 days now and didn't yet know his face either, only his name on a contract. He put the phone to his ear. The room watched. The salesman watched. Maya watched. Even you could tell. The people behind the glass wall of the service department had drifted over to look. The call connected. Calvin said 5 words. Quiet, level, like he was ordering a coffee. Vivian, Meridian, Preston Hollow now. He hung up. Holloway snorted. First name basis with the VP. Sure you are. He turned to Wade Sutton and jerked his thumb. Walk him out. I'm done. Wade Sutton didn't move. Holloway turned. Wade, walk him out. And Wade Sutton, who had stood there and said nothing for 5 whole minutes, who would have to live with that, said low, maybe we just wait a second, Trent. Wait for what? Wade didn't answer, because Wade had heard the phone call. 5 words, no pleas, no explanation, no anger. That wasn't a man filing a complaint. That was a man giving an order to someone he knew would jump. Holloway hadn't heard it. Or maybe he had, and his pride had its hands over its own ears, because he turned back to Calvin and pointed at the glass doors. You've got 30 seconds, he said, to walk out of here, or I call the real police, not the corporate fairy godmother, the real ones. Calvin Dupree bent down. The room held its breath because they thought, finally, he's going to pick it up. But he didn't reach for the money. He picked up 1 bill, a single 5 that had landed near his boot, and he looked at it, and he set it on the counter. Then he pulled out one of the showroom chairs, the nice leather ones by the espresso bar, and he sat down. I'll wait, he said. And then headlights swung across the 40-foot glass, and a black SUV came into the lot too fast and stopped crooked, across 2 spaces, and a door slammed and heels hit the pavement quick and hard and got louder, and the front doors of Meridian motor cars swung open like the building had inhaled. Vivian Castellano came through them like a woman whose house was burning down. Mid-50s, charcoal suit, reading glasses shoved up into her hair. She was scanning the room before the doors finished closing behind her, and Trent Holloway, who knew her, who'd shaken her hand at the regional meeting in March and gotten a satisfactory on his last review, straightened his tie and put on his best face and stepped forward, because he figured this was about a complaint, some upset customer who'd gotten through to corporate. And he'd handled those before. A little charm. A little spin. He'd done it a dozen times with the general manager. Vivian, he said, hey, listen, I can explain. There's a guy. She walked straight past him, didn't look at him. Didn't slow down. Her eyes were locked on the man in the canvas work jacket sitting by the espresso bar with his hands folded in his lap, and Trent Holloway's mouth hung open on the word he'd been about to say. Vivian Castellano stopped in front of Calvin Dupree, and the whole room watched her face change. The rush, the panic, all of it drained off and was replaced by something that looked an awful lot like fear. Not fear of danger, fear of failing. The specific fear of a person who has just realized their boss saw, with his own eyes, exactly what was allowed to happen on their watch. Mr. Dupree, she said, and she said it clear enough for every table, every salesman, every phone in the room. I am so sorry. I came as fast as I could, Mr. Dupree. The name drifted across the marble. Like smoke, Trent Holloway's raised hand came down to his side. The couple by the window turned to look at each other. Maya Brennan went absolutely still, the wallet she'd rescued still in her hand. Wade Sutton took another step back, and the man in the golf clothes, the one who'd shaken his head at Calvin, slowly set his little espresso cup down on its saucer and stared. Mr. Dupree? Holloway's voice cracked on the second word. Who? Vivian Castellano turned to face him, and her expression could have cut glass. Trent, she said. This is Calvin Dupree, founder and chairman of Dupree Automotive Holdings. She let it land. She let every syllable settle into every corner of that beautiful, silent room. He is the owner of this dealership, and of the other 11 in this region. The acquisition closed Monday. The room did not gasp. It was worse than that. It went dead. The soft instrumental music kept playing, oblivious, and underneath it there was nothing, no voices, no shuffle, just the hum of the climate control, and somewhere faintly, the tick of the engine cooling in the SUV out front. Holloway's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Calvin. He looked at the jacket, the boots, the cap on the man's knee. He looked at the face of the man he'd called a stray, the man he'd told to empty his pockets, the man whose money was still scattered across the floor he was standing on. That's, he said. No, that's not. He shook his head. This is a joke, somebody's. Calvin Dupree reached over to the counter and picked up the folded sheet of paper, the one Holloway had tried to open, the one Calvin had stopped him from reading. He unfolded it, slow, and laid it flat on the glass, turned so the room could see. Across the top, the letterhead, Dupree Automotive Holdings, clean and black. Below it, the terms, the entity names, the 12 addresses, and at the bottom, in blue ink, Calvin's signature. Closed Monday, Calvin said. His voice was exactly the same as it had been the whole time. Quiet, level, not 1 degree louder. 12 stores, $41 million. I came out here today to see how my people were treating folks. He looked down at the money on the floor, the check by the tire, the bills under the rope. Nobody had touched a cent of it. Now I know. The color went out of Trent Holloway's face all at once, like someone had pulled a plug. He'd been red with anger 5 minutes ago, and now he was white, paper white, and his lips moved and nothing came out, and his hands, the same hands that had thrown the money, hung limp at his sides. Vivian Castellano stepped close to him and lowered her voice, though it carried anyway in that silence. "Did you throw this man's money on the floor?" she said. Holloway's eyes went around the room looking for help, for an exit, for one single person who'd back him. The golf clothes man was studying his own napkin. Wade Sutton was looking at the floor. The woman by the window had her phone up and pointed at Holloway's face, and so did 2 others. "I didn't. He started. I didn't know who he." "Did you call him a boy?" Vivian said. "Did you tell him to get down on the floor?" Silence. Long, heavy. The kind that presses on your chest. "There are 9 people in this room," Vivian said, "and at least 3 phones recording. I'll ask you once more. Did you throw a customer's money on the floor and tell him to pick it up?" Holloway swallowed. "It was," he said. "I thought he was." "You thought he was what?" Calvin's voice came from behind her, still seated, still calm. "A thief," he said. "That's what you decided when I walked in. A man casing your floor." Holloway flinched like he'd been struck. And then Calvin Dupree stood up. He wasn't a big man, and he rose without hurry, and yet something about the way he came up out of that chair made the whole room feel smaller. The way a man stands when he has nothing to prove, and everyone in the room finally understands that. The chair didn't scrape. It barely whispered. He walked toward Holloway and stopped 3 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to make Holloway feel the distance, the real distance, the kind that had nothing to do with feet. "You didn't disrespect the owner of this dealership," Calvin said. "I need you to hear me because I think it matters. You disrespected a man you were sure had no power." He took a breath. "That's worse. That's the truth of who you are when you think nobody important is watching." Holloway's chin trembled. His eyes were wet and bright. He opened his mouth and nothing came out. Not a word, just air. Calvin turned to Maya Brennan, who was still behind the desk with the rescued wallet in her hand and tears running down her face. "You spoke up," he said, and his voice softened for the first time all afternoon, when nobody else in this room would. "You said my name was Trent's to answer for, and you tried to help me anyway, and he threatened you for it, and you stayed." He nodded at her, slow. "I want you to remember you did that." Maya nodded. She couldn't speak, but she held his eyes, and in that look there was something that had not been in the room all day, not when Holloway was mocking, not when the money was flying. Hope. Then Holloway started talking fast, the way people do when the ground is going out from under them and they're grabbing at anything, any word, any version of the afternoon that doesn't end with them standing there alone. "Mr. Dupree," he said. Look, if I'd known who you were, I never would have." "That's the problem," Calvin said. Not sharp. Just final, like a door closing. "If you'd known who I was, you'd have smiled, handed me the keys, called me sir, brought me a coffee." He nodded toward the espresso bar. "And the next black man who came through that door in a work jacket, you'd have done all of this to him instead." He let it sit. "You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry it was me." Vivian Castellano already had her phone out, typing with one thumb. "Trent," she said, not looking up, "you're suspended, effective right now, pending a full investigation. I need your badge, your keys, and your floor credentials before you leave the building." "Suspended?" His voice climbed. "Vivian, come on, 3 years. I'm your #1 closer. Badge. Keys. Now." Holloway's hands shook as he unclipped the lanyard from his belt, not movie shaking. The quiet kind, where the fingers don't quite do what you tell them. He set his badge on the glass counter, his name printed across it, and the lot keys beside it, and they landed with a sound that was louder than it should have been. Maya Brennan watched it happen, and her jaw tightened, and it wasn't anger on her face, it was something closer to relief. "Wade," Vivian said, "walk Mr. Holloway out." And Wade Sutton, who 20 minutes earlier had been told to throw this man off the lot, stepped forward and held an arm toward the same glass doors Holloway had been pointing at. Holloway looked at him, looked for the thing two men who'd shared 3 years of slow Tuesdays might still have between them, and found nothing. Wade's face was stone. "Let's go, Trent," he said, quiet. Holloway took 2 steps and stopped and turned back. 3 years, he said. "Every weekend, every late close, I built half the numbers in this store. You're throwing that out over a misunderstanding?" Calvin bent and picked up one bill from the floor, a single, and he turned it over once and set it on the counter next to the badge and the keys. "You threw a man's money on the ground and told him to crawl for it," he said. "That's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice. And choices have weight." He looked at the bill, at the badge beside it. "You'll find that out." Holloway turned and walked, and Wade Sutton followed 2 steps behind, and the glass doors swung open, and the late Texas sun poured in, gold and indifferent, the kind of light that doesn't care what just happened underneath it. And Trent Holloway stepped through it, and the doors closed behind him with a soft, final click. Now here is the part where you might want to look away, and here is the part where you shouldn't, because the whole reason this story is being told to you is what came after the doors closed. The young woman by the window, the one with the phone, was named Sasha Holt, 26, a paralegal who'd come in on her day off to look at a used sedan. She had recorded all of it. From the moment Holloway held that cashier's check up to the light, to the moment the money hit the floor to Vivian Castellano, walking past him like he was a coat rack. 3 minutes and 51 seconds, no edits, no caption needed. She posted it that night with 4 words. This happened in Dallas. By midnight, it had 250,000 views. By morning, it had 6 million. The anger came first, raw and fast, and then the clips came. People cutting out the worst 8 seconds and looping them, the money falling, the word, the pointing finger, and somebody, nobody could ever say who, attached 3 words to it that turned a video into a movement. Pick it up. By the end of the week, it was a hashtag, and the hashtag was a flood. And underneath it, people posted their own afternoons, their own counters, their own salesmen and front desks, and the particular cold of being decided about in half a second. Thousands of them, each one different, each one the same. And then a reporter named Alyssa Reyes, who worked for an affiliate out of Fort Worth and had a habit of making phone calls that made people nervous, watched the video like everyone else, and then did the thing almost nobody else does. She kept going. She pulled records. She tracked down 2 salesmen who'd quit Meridian in the last 2 years and a service writer who'd been let go and was happy to talk. And what Alyssa Reyes found was worse than 1 bad afternoon and 1 bad man. There had been 3 written complaints about Trent Holloway in 4 years, all 3 from black customers. One was a couple who'd been told the GT was sold when it was sitting right there on the floor, then watched a white couple take it for a test drive 20 minutes later. One was a man told he'd need a co-signer before they'd even run his credit, a man who, it turned out, had a higher score than the salesman who insulted him. One was a young woman told, flat out, that she'd be more comfortable looking at the used inventory out back. All 3 complaints had been filed, and all 3 had gone exactly nowhere, because the man whose job it was to review them was the general manager of Meridian Motor Cars, a man named Roger Tillman, who had run that store for 9 years, who golfed with Trent Holloway most Saturdays, whose kids played ball with Holloway's kids. When a complaint about his top closer crossed Roger Tillman's desk, Roger Tillman made it disappear. One of the files Alyssa Reyes recovered, pulled off the company's own server, was an email from Tillman to Holloway, sent the night after the second complaint. It said 3 words, handled. Forget it. A man's dignity, erased in 3 words. Alyssa Reyes put all of it on the air. The timestamps, the recovered files, the deleted complaints. She interviewed 2 of the 3 customers on camera, and one of them, a woman with her hands folded in her lap, looked into the lens and said she wasn't surprised, and that being unsurprised was the worst part of all. Dupree Automotive Holdings put out a statement within hours, and Calvin Dupree's voice was all over it. What happened at Meridian, it said, was not one man on one afternoon. It was a system built to hide that man, to bury the people he hurt, and to protect the numbers he brought in. That system ends today. Trent Holloway was terminated for cause that same day. Roger Tillman was removed within the week and gone within the month, his name in Alyssa Reyes's follow-up beside his own emails. The store closed for 10 days. When it reopened, there was a new general manager, an anonymous complaint line that went to an outside firm instead of to the man being complained about, and a training program that ran 12 weeks with facilitators from outside the company, not a slideshow, the real thing. And by the front doors bolted to the wall at eye level, a small brass plaque. Every person who walks through this door deserves respect, it read. If you are shown anything less, call this number. And the number underneath did not ring to the manager. It rang to a board that did not work for the store. Trent Holloway didn't go to jail. This was never that kind of story. But his name is welded to that video now, in every search, forever. He deleted his social accounts inside 2 days, and it didn't matter. The internet had already kept everything. The world he'd built, the 3 plaques on the wall, the register he ran, the people he'd bullied into silence, all of it was gone. Not because he insulted the wrong man, because the right man finally had the power to make it stop. 6 weeks later, a 12-year-old pickup with a cracked windshield pulled into the visitor row at Meridian Motor Cars. Same spot, same time of day, the late sun cutting low and gold across the glass. Calvin Dupree stepped out in the same canvas jacket, the same boots, the clay long since knocked off the toes. He pushed through the doors and a bell chimed over them, a small thing, a new thing, a welcoming thing. The young man at the desk looked up with an easy smile and said, "Afternoon, welcome to Meridian. What can I help you find?" No glance at the jacket, no look at the truck, just a man being helped. And behind him, walking the floor with a tablet in her hand and a different name on her badge, Maya Brennan, assistant manager now, looked up and saw him, and her whole face did something complicated, surprise and memory and warmth all at once. "Mr. Dupree," she said. "Came to look at that blue one," he said, "the GT. If anybody'll let me drive it." Maya laughed, the kind that comes out before you can stop it, and she pulled a key fob from a drawer and set it in his open hand, gentle, deliberate, the way you give something to a man you respect, and not because of his title. "You remember which one's mine," he said. "I remember everything about that day," she said. He turned the fob over in his palm. The midnight blue coupe sat in the center of the floor under its spotlight, exactly where it had been, the price card the same, the paint still looking wet. He walked over and ran his thumb along the edge of the door, and out the 40-foot glass, the Texas sun was going down soft and easy over a lot full of cars he owned and a building full of people he was still learning the names of, and near the door, bolted to the wall at eye level, the small brass plaque caught the last of the light. He stopped and read it, all the way through, and ran his thumb across the raised letters once. Then he got in the blue car, and Maya Brennan walked around to open the bay door for him, and he drove it out into the gold light like a man who'd waited a long time for one good afternoon.